ranking member, they were discussing two different forms. One was the intent to withdraw and homeschool, and another one, if I recall, was an option form. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but could the good chairwoman, through you, Madam Speaker, describe those two forms again, because it was kind of confusing, and also share with us the questions that will be asked on those forms, or what information they're going to ascertain, through you.
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker. The option form is a current existing form, only used when families have a child who is 5 and they are opting to not send that child to kindergarten. Similarly, families have the option to not send a 6-year-old child to kindergarten, so long as they also fill out that option form. As I said earlier, it's often what we think of as red shirting. That's existing law. We have made no changes. What we've introduced here in this bill is the intent to educate form. That is new. And also the withdrawal form. That is also new. And we have asked SDE to create those two new forms. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the good chairwoman. So the option form is only for 5- and 6-year-olds to inform the school that they're going to continue to keep their child home at that point in time. Through you, Madam Chair.
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker. Yes, that's correct.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so could you describe the form that is for intent and the difference between that of the one for withdrawal, and what kind of questions or what they're looking for on those two, and why and how they're different? Through you.
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker. We've tasked SDE to create those forms. They have the next year to do that. Those forms in this bill are to be completed for July 1, 2027, but we haven't prescribed what those forms are. That's for SDE to determine based on the information the school district would need. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and to the good chairwoman. So my question came up because I was thinking about a scenario, because we're saying that, if I'm correct, if you withdraw your child and the registry is checked and/or an open case is going on, that the parent would not be able to homeschool. Is that correct? Through you, Madam Chair?
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker. The two instances in which you would not be able to homeschool is if you're exiting from public school for parent-managed learning and there's an active investigation. And that is time limited, as I'm sure the good ranking member of the Children's Committee knows, to the 33 business days. And also, you would not be able to withdraw your child if someone residing in the household over 18 is on the Central Registry of Child Neglect or Abuse. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to follow up to that, so how would that be enforced with regard to a parent asking that's on the registry, or someone in the home on the registry? They put a form in to withdraw and homeschool their child. The school says no, and they are determined to do it anyway. What would be next? What would happen? What would be the ramifications of that? Through you.
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker. While the language in this bill does not specifically detail that process, but the child would not be withdrawn. So if they are not coming to school, they would eventually meet the criteria for chronic absenteeism or truancy, and those systems would kick into place. If there is suspicion for educational neglect, then mandated reporters at the school would be required to file a report of educational neglect to DCF. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, does that mean that the 95,000 children that the good ranking member mentioned earlier that are truant would also have a file submitted with educational neglect with regard to those children that aren't showing up? Through you, Madam Chair.
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker, I got updated numbers. 20,000 fewer children are truant, 72,000, but we still have obviously a tremendous amount of work to do. And yes, there could be educational neglect filed for those cases, but also there are systems in place where every district has a truancy officer. In this budget, we reviewed in appropriations, $10.5 million, I believe, is, let me restate that. Sorry, when the program was set up with federal funds, $10.5 million was budgeted for our districts with the highest rates of truancy and chronic absenteeism to have more individuals going and doing home visits to try to re-engage those families. Lots of efforts are happening, and our families who are struggling the most are most difficult cases. But yes, absolutely, if a mandated reporter in the school suspects educational neglect, they are required to report that. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So through you, and through what the good chairwoman said, 72,000, not 95, we'll say 72. 72,000 children in this state are truant. And because they're truant, as would be the child that was withdrawn, the school said, no, you can't withdraw and homeschool. They would then be filed as educational neglect. So would it be fair to say that there's 72,000 files on children that have in their file educational neglect? Through you, Madam Chair.
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker, if a school district is engaging with a family, they're using their youth service bureaus, maybe their juvenile review board, they are in active dialogue and relationship with these families, trying to get a better system for the child to be returning to school. Maybe in those cases, they're not going to file educational neglect because they are working to get those kids back into school. I can't speak for the actual number. I don't know if DCS reports those types of numbers for educational neglect, but we have lots of systems, of course not perfect, but working to try to re-engage those students. Through you, Madam Speaker. Nice to see you up there.
Nice to see you, Madam Chair. Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And through you, so there's 72,000 children in this state that are truant, some of which are working with the school system trying to get the kids back in, but obviously they're not successful because we still have 72,000 children truant. So is there a file in 72,000 truant children's file that says that there is educational neglect? Because obviously they're still truant. They haven't been successful. While they might be working with them, they're not successful. So through you, Madam Speaker, I'm trying to ascertain if that file is in their record of educational neglect. Through you.
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker, truancy can mean a lot of things. You could be sick for 2 weeks, miss 10 days, and you're truant, but you come back because you got better. You had the flu, what have you. That would be filed as truant, but then you're not educationally neglecting your child because now your child's back in school. So truancy isn't mean you never came back. Those numbers mean how many children. I would imagine several of us in this chamber may have gotten a truancy letter for a child who had COVID and then the flu and some stomach bug later in the year. The state has really amped up their efforts to identify chronic absenteeism and truism after the pandemic, so they've been much more aggressive in identifying those cases to make efforts to bring kids back into school. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So through you, a child that's withdrawn, a parent or someone in the household on the registry, the school says, no, you cannot homeschool. The child stays home. The parent homeschools them anyway. There's no educational neglect going on, none at all. What do you do about that? Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker, currently educational neglect is not defined by a quality of instruction in a home. It's only defined based on truancy. So there is no standard for educational neglect once you have exited the schools in the statutes. But if you take your child out without being legally withdrawn, you would be out of compliance with the law. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Speaker, so they'd be out of compliance with the law, but there wouldn't be any necessarily educational neglect. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker, I think in this instance there would be, because you would be considered truant if you are currently enrolled in the school and not attending. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As would the 72,000 children that are enrolled in school and truant. I'm assuming that there would be a file that said there was educational neglect because they're truant. I think I understand the good chairwoman to be saying that if you're truant, there's educational neglect, regardless of whether you're working with a family or not, that still exists. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker, you could be truant for many reasons, as described. You could have pneumonia and you're out for 10 days. That meets the definition of truancy. You return to school on that 11th day. You're no longer truant. You'll be counted in this number of truant students, but there won't be educational neglect filed by a mandated reporter because the child's back in school. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I'm going to move on and just give a scenario. There's a child in school that's being bullied. There's a lot of bullying going on in school. The child's being bullied in school and comes home and tells their mom, I'm not going back to school. I was punched in the face today. I've been pushed around all week long and I don't want to go back to school. And the mom says, you know what? We're done. I'm going to homeschool you. I'm going to withdraw you and I'm going to homeschool you. So she does. She does what she's supposed to do. She puts in the withdrawal form. And they later find out that the father had been on the registry years ago. So he's on the registry. So the school tells the mom, you can't homeschool because dad is on the registry. The kid's not going to go to school. They said, the kid told the mom, I'm not going back to school. The mom doesn't want the kid to go back to school because he's going to be in an unsafe situation. What would happen then? Through you, Madam Chair. Madam Speaker, excuse me.
Through you, Madam Speaker, if the child's not withdrawn from school, the child's still enrolled in school, and if the child is not attending school, chronic absenteeism and truancy and potentially educational neglect would apply. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. No, the mother went down to the school and withdrew the school. Withdrew the child from the school and said, I'm going to homeschool my child. I'm not sending them back to this school where they're getting bullied. The child's going to stay home and get homeschooled. The school told them no, the child is not going to go back. The child's not going back. One, because the mother doesn't want them to go back. She wants to keep them safe. And two, the child refuses to go back. What next? Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker, again, the withdrawal will not be granted in this circumstance, but if the individual residing in the home who is on the registry believes they should be removed from the registry, there is an entire process for them to appeal and ask for being removed from the registry. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think I'm still not getting my question answered because I want to know what happens when this scenario plays out. I know the good chairwoman's saying that they can apply to appeal, and in the meantime, it may take a few months. I don't know how long. They may get appealed several months down the road. But in the meantime, exactly what happens to the parents and the child with regard to, she's saying that they're breaking the law. Through you, Madam Chair. Madam Speaker.
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker, I think I've answered this question. The withdrawal is not granted if you have somebody residing in the home who is on the central registry for child neglect and abuse. So the child cannot be withdrawn in that case. And so then it would be chronic absenteeism and truancy and potentially educational neglect. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So in spite of the child being educated at home, in their file, you're going to write down educational neglect simply because the school said you can't educate at home. The parents are doing it anyway, but you're going to put in their file educational neglect. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker, if the child is now going to be in a home with no other mandated reporters, with somebody who has committed crimes against children that rise to the level to be on the central registry, that is correct. If they believe they are reformed, they're not the person they were when they were on the registry. They are provided at the time that they are given the notice of why their withdrawal has not been approved, all of the processes for them to appeal the decision of them being on the registry. That is a 60-day timeline to be removed from the registry at a maximum. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I failed to describe the mother a little further. The mother's a nurse. She's a mandated reporter. So the child is with the mandated reporter in their home. What happens then? Through you, Madam Speaker.
Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker, the statute does not differentiate for that.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted to describe another scenario. A child has been in public school. The parent has decided they don't want to continue vaccinating their child. They're not going to vaccinate them anymore, so the child is not allowed in school. The parents decide, we're going to pull you out of school, withdraw you, and homeschool you. The father's on the registry. Through you, Madam Speaker, what next?
Representative Leeper, did you hear the question, or would you like it repeated?
Through you, Madam Speaker, if the child's already enrolled in public school, then the family decides they no longer want to vaccinate the child, that child would not be required to leave public schools. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
I'm sorry, I don't think I understood, Madam Speaker. Could she repeat that, please? Through you, Madam Speaker.
Sure. Representative Leeper, could you repeat your answer?
Through you, Madam Speaker, the students who are currently enrolled in public schools have been grandfathered from the vaccination schedule. If they then decide to not have any future vaccines, they're not kicked out. They would be a part of the cohort that's currently in our schools who are grandfathered in. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to be a little more clear. The child's in the school right now. They're going to public school. They've had a few vaccinations, but the parent doesn't want to give them any more. So the parent decides to homeschool the child because they can't go to public school. If you're not up to date with vaccines, you can't stay in public school unless earlier on you had an exemption, which this parent did not. They didn't ask for it then, so they have no exemption. So they want to pull their child out, they don't want to vaccinate them, and they're going to homeschool. They put the withdrawal form in, which is required, and then they investigate and find out the father's on the registry. What happens next? Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker, if the family wants to withdraw the child, the same process applies. If the father is on the registry, he would also be presented with the information to get off the registry. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The father's not off the registry, he's on the registry. He's considered illegal to have his child home to homeschool. But it's also illegal for his child to go to public school because he's not going to follow the vaccine schedule and get vaccinated. Through you, Madam Speaker, what happens next?
Representative Leeper.
Madam Speaker, I'm not the public health co-chair, but I don't believe our statutes require if you don't get your high school physical that you would be kicked out of public schools if you had your kindergarten vaccine schedule completed. So again, the dad being on the registry would be still the same issue in the other examples. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Through you, Madam Speaker, the question still hasn't been answered. The child is not going to get vaccinated. They're not up to date with their vaccines. The school is saying you need to go get vaccinated. The mother and father don't want to vaccinate the child. The school caught up with their records. Let's say they caught up and realized the child wasn't fully vaccinated. You must get fully vaccinated in order to return to school. Mom says, no, I'm not doing it. I'll pull you out and I'll homeschool you. They put in the withdrawal form, pull the kid out, and they later find out the father's on the registry. They're told they can't homeschool, and the nurse is saying you can't return to school because you're not fully vaccinated. What next? Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker. I believe I've answered this question. We are not kicking kids out of public schools if they were originally vaccinated and then don't submit their either middle school or high school physical form. So again, the issue would still be trying to withdraw the child into a home with somebody who is on the registry. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The child went to school and was not vaccinated like they were supposed to be. And that does happen. The nurse catches up with their schedule, calls home, and says, you must get these vaccines. Happens all the time. All the time, the nurses are catching up with records. You're not fully vaccinated, you need to get this, this, and this to be up to date. No, I'm not doing it. I'm going to withdraw my child from school and homeschool them. They're told no because the father's on the registry. They can't homeschool them. They can't send them back to school because the nurse said they're not up to date on their vaccines. What next? Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker. We're in a real corner case now. So you're in kindergarten, a handful of months, have not yet submitted your physical form with the vaccinations. So we're a few months into school. You refuse to submit that form. You're also not grandfathered in. Then I suppose in this very corner case, they would say you can't enroll in this school. And if anybody in the school has reasonable suspicion to to believe there is child neglect or abuse in the home, then they would have to report that. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, I didn't catch the end. I'm sorry. Could you just repeat that again? I'm not following the line of explanation. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Leeper.
Through you, Madam Speaker. I guess we would have to see if the child was ever technically enrolled if they had not submitted the form. So if you're never technically enrolled because you refuse to submit the vaccination form, I think that's the case that's been presented. You were never vaccinated, you wanted to go to public kindergarten, but refused to be vaccinated, weren't grandfathered in because you didn't get a waiver, and now want to, those few months, pull your child back out. So you've changed your mind quickly. So if you've never met the criteria to enroll, then you maybe are not withdrawing. This is a very corner case. And again, if the child is residing at home with somebody who has committed child abuse that rises to the level of being on the registry, and anybody in the school has reasonable suspicion for child neglect or abuse, they would have to report that to DCF. Through you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Dauphinais.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think the good chairwoman did a good job of really not clarifying the question, but that's okay, I'll move on.